The morning fog sits heavy over the French countryside. September 19th, 1944. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams stands in the turret of his Sherman tank, Thunderbolt, watching grey mist roll across the fields near Arracourt. Somewhere out there, in that soup of white and grey, German Panthers are moving. 45 tons of sloped armour and long-barrelled 75mm guns. The finest medium tank Germany has produced. Every American tanker knows the mathematics of this fight. 1 Panther theoretically equals 5 Shermans. German frontal armour laughs at American 75mm rounds. The Panther's gun can kill a Sherman from 2,000 metres away, distances where American crews can barely see the target, let alone hurt it. Abrams's men know these numbers. They've heard the stories from Normandy. They've seen the intelligence briefings. 80mm frontal glacis armour sloped at 55 degrees. 100mm turret face. A gun that penetrates 138mm of armour at 1,000 metres. The Sherman? 63mm of frontal armour. A gun that struggles to penetrate Panther armour even at point-blank range. The German tankers climbing into their Panthers this morning know it too. They've been told American tanks are inferior. Mass-produced garbage from factories that prioritise quantity over quality. Their propaganda films show Panthers crushing Sherman after Sherman. German steel triumphant over American industrial weakness. But something is about to happen in these fields around Arracourt that will shatter German assumptions about armoured warfare, something that has nothing to do with armour thickness or gun penetration. Something the Germans failed to account for in all their engineering excellence. Inside every Sherman in the 37th Tank Battalion sits a radio. Not just any radio. The SCR-508, a frequency-modulated communications system designed by Bell Laboratories. Each Sherman can talk to every other Sherman in the battalion. The company commander can coordinate 5 tanks simultaneously. The battalion commander can direct 3 companies at once. Every tank commander hears the same tactical picture. Every driver receives the same orders. Every gunner knows where to aim before the target appears. The German Panthers have radios too. The Fugue 5. A 10-watt amplitude-modulated transceiver with a range of 2 to 3 kilometers. 1 receiver, 1 transmitter. Simple. Effective for basic tank-to-tank communication within a platoon. But the American system operates on an entirely different principle. Frequency modulation versus amplitude modulation. Multiple preset channels versus limited frequencies. Integrated battalion-level coordination versus platoon-level communication. Every American tank commander can listen and transmit simultaneously. German tank commanders must choose, listen or talk. Not both. The American system allows something revolutionary. Real-time coordination across an entire battalion. A German tank appears on the left flank. The tank that spots it reports immediately. Within seconds, every Sherman commander in the area knows the exact location, the direction of movement, the type of target. Tanks maneuver without waiting for orders. Crews anticipate threats before seeing them. Fire emerges from unexpected angles because information flows faster than steel. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The fog that morning presents perfect conditions for what's about to unfold. Visibility drops to less than 100 meters. German reconnaissance, already inadequate, becomes impossible. The 5th Panzer Army attacking toward Arracourt has no dedicated scouting units. They advance blindly into American positions, hoping their superior armour will compensate for their lack of intelligence. They are wrong. The Americans have scouted every hill, every tree line, every depression in the ground. They know this terrain intimately. They've identified kill zones where German tanks will be forced to expose their weaker side armour. They've positioned Shermans in concealed positions with perfect fields of fire. They've coordinated with tank destroyer units, with artillery, with air support, and they've done all of this through radio communication that German forces simply cannot match. The 113th Panzer Brigade begins its assault at 0800 hours. 40 Panthers and supporting units push toward American positions south of Arracourt. The Panthers move with confidence. Their crews believe in their technical superiority. They expect American forces to retreat in the face of overwhelming German armor. Instead, they drive into a carefully orchestrated killing ground. The fog conceals American positions perfectly. German tank commanders peer, through their optics, seeing nothing but white mist. They advance based on maps and compass headings, unable to see the enemy they're supposed to engage. Then the radios in the American tanks come alive. Contact, Panthers, grid 273415, moving west. Range 800 meters. The message reaches every Sherman commander in Abrams's battalion simultaneously. Tanks that haven't seen the enemy yet begin maneuvering into flanking positions. The Germans, operating with limited radio communication between platoons, have no idea they're being surrounded. Captain Kenneth Lamison's C Company spots 3 Panthers emerging from the fog along the Metz-Strasbourg road. His gunner fires. 1 Panther disabled. The German tanks recoil, turning south away from the American fire. Lamison doesn't pursue. He does something the Germans don't expect. He reports, 3 Panthers disabled 1, 2 retreating south toward Bézange-la-Petite. This information reaches Abrams in seconds. Abrams issues orders to a platoon of Shermans from Captain Lamison's company. Move to ridge at Bézange-la-Petite. Cut off their retreat. The American tanks reach the ridge before the Germans realize they're being flanked. When the Panthers turn south, expecting clear retreat, they expose their side armor to American guns, positioned exactly where they need to be. 3 more Panthers destroyed. The Germans never saw it coming. This pattern repeats across the battlefield. German Panthers, advancing through fog with minimal coordination, stumble into American positions. The Americans don't fight them frontally. They let them pass. Then, German tanks receive fire from unexpected angles. From positions the Germans didn't scout. From tanks that coordinate their movements through radio communication, the Germans cannot intercept or jam. The Americans use frequency-modulated signals that German equipment cannot effectively monitor, even when German intelligence intercepts American transmissions. The rapid coordination across multiple channels makes it impossible to predict American movements. The 113th Panzer Brigade advances deeper into the salient around Arracourt. They're looking for American headquarters, for supply dumps, for artillery positions. They find none of these things because American scouts reported their movements hours earlier. The Americans withdrew everything valuable and positioned their tanks in ambush positions. The Panthers discover this when they reach what they thought was American rear area. M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers engage them with direct fire at close range. Artillery pieces designed for indirect fire, now slamming 105mm shells into German side armor at ranges where even a Panther's protection becomes inadequate. The German tank commanders realize they've driven into a trap. They attempt to withdraw. But American tanks have already moved to cut off retreat routes. Radio. Coordination that took the Americans seconds would take the Germans minutes. Minutes they don't have. German platoon leaders try to issue orders to their scattered units. The limited range of their radios means many tanks never receive instructions. Some German tank commanders see the danger and retreat independently. Others, waiting for orders that never arrive, remain in place until American fire destroys them. By mid-morning, the fog begins to lift. The Germans expect this will help them. Clearer visibility means they can use their superior optics and longer-range guns, but the lifting fog reveals the full extent of their tactical disaster. 11 Panthers lie destroyed or abandoned across the fields south of Arracourt. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which began the morning with overwhelming force, is retreating in disorder. American losses? 5 Shermans, 3 tank destroyers. The mathematical equation that said 1 Panther equals 5 Shermans has been inverted. The Americans aren't winning through superior armor or guns. They're winning through superior coordination. Through information warfare. Through radio communication that allows entire battalions to operate as single coordinated units, while German forces fragment into isolated platoons, fighting their own separate battles. The pattern established on September 19th continues for 11 days. The 5th Panzer Army launches attack after attack toward Arracourt. Fresh Panthers arrive from Germany. Veteran crews from the Eastern Front bring their combat experience. None of it matters. The Americans have cracked the code. They've discovered that modern armored warfare isn't about individual tank duels. It's about information, about coordination, about using radio communication to concentrate force at decisive points while the enemy scatters their strength across the battlefield. American tank commanders develop tactics specifically designed to exploit their communications advantage. When German tanks appear, American units don't engage immediately. They report. They wait. They allow German forces to penetrate deeper into American positions. Then, when German tanks are fully committed, scattered across the battlefield, American forces coordinate simultaneous attacks from multiple directions. The Germans find themselves surrounded without understanding how it happened. Their radio communication isn't fast enough to counter American maneuvers. By the time German platoon leaders realize they're being flanked, American tanks are already in position. The technology itself seems simple. FM radio versus AM radio, multiple channels versus limited frequencies. But the implications transform the entire nature of armored combat. An American battalion of 53 Shermans operates as a single coordinated fighting unit. A German panzer brigade of 40 Panthers fragments into 4 platoons that struggle to communicate effectively with each other. The Americans can concentrate, 20 tanks against 5 German tanks in minutes. The Germans need tens of minutes to coordinate a response. In armored warfare, that delay is fatal. The human factor multiplies these advantages. American tank commanders trust their radios. They trust that when they report enemy positions, other tanks will respond. They trust that orders from battalion headquarters reflect accurate battlefield information. This trust allows aggressive maneuver. German tank commanders, operating with limited communication, must be more cautious. They cannot be certain that other units know where they are or what they're doing. They cannot coordinate complex maneuvers because their radio network doesn't support it. The technical specifications favor the Germans. The systemic capabilities favor the Americans. In September 1944, near Arracourt, the Americans proved that systemic capabilities matter more. Captain William Spencer's A Company demonstrates this principle repeatedly. On September 20th, Spencer's Shermans engage elements of the 111th Panzer Brigade. The Germans have numerical superiority, better armor, better guns. Spencer's company has better radios. Spencer reports enemy positions to Abrams. Abrams coordinates B Company to flank the German force. C Company moves to cut off German retreat. 3 American companies, operating as one coordinated unit, surround a German force that outnumbers any single American company. The Germans fight bravely. Their Panthers destroy several Shermans. But isolated German platoons cannot coordinate with each other fast enough. American tanks attack from multiple directions simultaneously. When German commanders try to withdraw, they discover American tanks already blocking their escape routes. The Panthers, technically superior to any single Sherman, are defeated by coordinated action that German radio networks cannot match. American artillery integration amplifies the communications advantage. Every American tank battalion has radio links to supporting artillery battalions. When American tanks engage German armor, artillery fire arrives within minutes. German tank commanders must divide their attention. Threats from American tanks, threats from artillery. Threats they cannot see because American forward observers coordinate fires using radio networks the Germans cannot counter. German artillery, trying to support their panzer units, struggles with coordination. German forward observers communicate through different radio networks than panzer units. The time required to request, coordinate, and deliver artillery support gives American forces crucial minutes to maneuver before German fires arrive. Minutes that decide battles. Air support follows the same pattern. The 19th Tactical Air Command supports Patton's Third Army with P-47 Thunderbolts. American ground controllers coordinate airstrikes through radio networks integrated with tank battalions. When weather permits, German tank formations discover that American fighters arrive quickly, too quickly to be coincidence. The Americans are coordinating air and ground operations through radio communication faster than German forces can respond. German Luftwaffe support, already limited by fuel shortages and Allied air superiority, becomes further degraded by poor ground-to-air coordination. German tank commanders request air support through separate communication channels that don't integrate with their tank radios. By the time Luftwaffe aircraft receive mission orders, American ground forces have already moved. The Germans begin to understand what they're facing. After-action reports from Panzer commanders describe American tanks that seem to know where German forces are before visual contact. German intelligence officers analyze American radio transmissions and realize the scope of American communications capability. The Americans aren't just talking between individual tanks, they're coordinating entire battalions. Company commanders direct multiple platoons simultaneously. Battalion commanders orchestrate combined arms operations in real time. The German Fug 5 radio system, designed for platoon-level communication, cannot compete with American battalion-level coordination networks. German commanders attempt countermeasures. They issue orders limiting radio transmissions to reduce American intelligence gathering. This makes the coordination problem worse. Panzer units advancing with radio silence lose whatever limited coordination capability they possessed. They become even more vulnerable to American ambush tactics. Some German units attempt to jam American frequencies. The FM transmission system proves resistant to the jamming techniques that work against AM signals. American tankers continue coordinating attacks while German radio operators struggle to disrupt communications they don't fully understand. The 5th Panzer Army commits fresh forces. The 11th Panzer Division arrives to reinforce the faltering panzer brigades. These are veteran units with experienced crews. They've fought on the Eastern Front. They understand armoured warfare. But they've never faced an opponent with the communications capability the Americans possess. On September 22nd, elements of the 11th Panzer Division attack toward Arracourt with Panthers and Panzer IVs. They advance more cautiously than the panzer brigades. They use better reconnaissance. They coordinate their movements more carefully. It doesn't matter. American scouts report German movements before the attack begins. Abrams positions his battalion in defensive positions that maximize American advantages. When German tanks advance, they encounter American forces that somehow already know they're coming. The Germans achieve surprise nowhere. American tanks occupy every key terrain feature. Every approach route is covered by coordinated fields of fire. The Panthers advance into killing zones the Americans prepared hours earlier based on radio reports from reconnaissance units the Germans never detected. Captain Jimmy Leiper's platoon of M18 Hellcat tank destroyers engages German armour south of Arracourt. The Hellcat mounts a 76mm gun capable of penetrating Panther armour, but the Hellcat's armour is thin. In a direct fight, Panthers would destroy Hellcats easily. Leiper doesn't fight directly. He coordinates with Sherman units through radio communication. When Panthers appear, Leiper's Hellcats fire from concealed positions. German tanks turn toward the threat. This exposes their side armour to Sherman tanks that Leiper coordinated with before the engagement began. Panthers destroyed by concentrated fire from multiple directions. Fire that arrives simultaneously because American units coordinated the attack through radio networks seconds before pulling their triggers. The Germans lose 23 tanks on September 22nd. American losses remain minimal. The mathematical impossibility of the situation frustrates German commanders. Their tanks are superior, their crews are experienced, their tactical doctrine is sound. Yet they're being defeated by technically inferior American tanks commanded by crews with less combat experience. The answer lies in those radio sets humming in every American tank. Technology that transforms isolated vehicles into networked fighting systems. German Panzer doctrine evolved from World War I's experience. Fast-moving armoured formations exploiting breakthrough. Individual tank companies manoeuvring independently. Radio communication supporting this doctrine but not driving it. American doctrine evolved from different principles. Combined arms integration. Centralized control with decentralized execution. Radio communication enabling coordination impossible in previous conflicts. By September 25th, German forces around Arracourt have lost over 130 tanks. The 5th Panzer Army's offensive has failed completely. American forces hold all their positions. German attempts to cut American supply lines achieved nothing. Patton's Third Army continues its advance toward the German border. The Battle of Arracourt becomes one of the largest tank engagements fought by American forces in World War II. More importantly, it becomes a proving ground for a new kind of armoured warfare. Warfare where information dominates firepower, where coordination defeats technical superiority, where 8 radios, working together, destroy 40 tanks that should have been invincible. The technology itself seems unremarkable in retrospect. FM radio transmission, multiple preset channels, integrated battalion communication networks. But in September 1944, these capabilities represented revolutionary advancement in military communications. The SCR-508 radio in each Sherman weighed 181 pounds. It consumed significant electrical power. It required maintenance. Vacuum tubes burned out. Connections corroded. Crystal oscillators drifted off frequency. American tank crews maintained their radios with the same dedication they maintained their engines. They understood instinctively what German commanders learned through bitter experience. Working radios mattered more than thick armor. The radio enabled other advantages American forces exploited ruthlessly. Reconnaissance became vastly more effective when scouts could report immediately to battalion headquarters. Artillery fire became more responsive when forward observers coordinated directly with tank commanders. Air support arrived faster when ground controllers integrated into battalion command networks. Logistics improved when supply officers knew exactly where each company operated. Maintenance crews responded quicker when disabled tanks reported their locations precisely. Every aspect of military operations improved through better communication. German forces possessed technical excellence in individual weapons systems. The Panther tank represented sophisticated engineering. Its gun, its armor, its automotive components showed German industrial capability. But weapons systems don't fight wars in isolation. They fight as parts of larger military organizations that require communication, coordination, and information flow to function effectively. The Americans built their military system around these principles. Every tank carried a radio because American doctrine assumed coordination between tanks. Every radio used FM transmission because American engineers understood frequency modulation's advantages over amplitude modulation in mobile operations. Every battalion headquarters maintained multiple communication networks because American commanders expected to coordinate complex combined arms operations. The Germans built their military system around different assumptions. Individual weapons systems should be technically superior to enemy equivalents. Superior engineering would compensate for enemy numerical advantages. Tank commanders, leading from the front, would make tactical decisions based on battlefield conditions they observed directly. Radio communication supported this system, but didn't define it. The German Fug 5 radio provided adequate capability for its intended purpose: platoon-level coordination between tanks operating in visual range of each other. What the Germans failed to anticipate was an opponent who built their entire tactical system around communication capability that enabled coordination beyond visual range, beyond individual platoons, beyond anything German radio networks could match. If you find this story engaging, Please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams understood these principles intuitively. He didn't need technical specifications to recognize that his battalion's radio network gave him decisive advantage over German forces. He exploited that advantage ruthlessly. When German tanks appeared, Abrams didn't rush to engage them. He gathered information. He listened to reports from multiple companies. He built a complete picture of German dispositions before committing his forces. Then he issued coordinated orders that positioned American tanks exactly where they needed to be to achieve maximum effect. German commanders, limited by their radio networks, struggled to develop comparable battlefield awareness. They fought with partial information. They made decisions based on what individual tank commanders could see from their turrets. They coordinated movements between platoons through slower communication methods that gave American forces crucial minutes to maneuver. The human dimension of this advantage cannot be overstated. American tank commanders developed confidence in their communication systems. They trusted that information they reported would be acted upon. They trusted that orders they received reflected accurate understanding of battlefield conditions. This trust enabled aggressive tactics that less connected forces couldn't risk. German tank commanders, lacking equivalent communication capability, operated more cautiously. They couldn't be certain that other units knew where they were. They couldn't coordinate complex maneuvers that required precise timing between multiple platoons. The psychological impact of fighting blind against an opponent who seemed to see everything multiplied German disadvantages. September 29th, 1944. The final major German attack toward Arracourt. German forces have been reinforced. Fresh Panthers arrived from Germany. New crews replace casualties. Fuel supplies, always critical, have been temporarily improved. The 5th Panzer Army makes one more attempt to break through American positions. This attack follows different tactics. German commanders learned from previous failures. They advance more slowly. They scout their routes better. They attempt to maintain better coordination between units. They understand that rushing blindly into American positions results in disaster. But understanding the problem doesn't solve it. The fundamental limitation remains. German radio networks cannot match American coordination capability. The attack begins at dawn. Multiple German columns advance from different directions. This should divide American attention, force them to respond to threats across a wider front. The Americans simply adjust their radio coordination to match. Battalion headquarters receives reports from all threatened sectors simultaneously. Abrams repositions his forces based on complete understanding of German dispositions. German commanders, receiving fragmented reports from isolated platoons, struggle to understand the full scope of American response. By the time German forces realize American tanks have and concentrated against their strongest thrust, the battle is already decided. Hill 318 becomes the decisive terrain. German forces capture it initially, pushing back American defenders. For a moment, German commanders believe they've achieved breakthrough. Then American artillery fire begins, coordinated through radio networks linking tank units with artillery battalions. Within minutes, the hill is covered by accurate fire that German forces cannot escape. American tank destroyers maneuver into flanking positions. Sherman tanks advance from multiple directions. The German force on Hill 318 finds itself surrounded. 23 German tanks destroyed in the fighting around the hill. The Germans retreat. They abandon Hill 318. More importantly, they abandon their offensive. The 5th Panzer Army's attempt to cut American supply lines has failed utterly. Final accounting shows the true scale of American victory. German forces committed approximately 162 tanks and assault guns to the Battle of Arracourt. Of these, approximately 200 were destroyed or abandoned. American losses totaled 25 Sherman tanks and 7 tank destroyers. The mathematical ratio that should have favored the Germans reversed completely. The Americans lost 32 armored vehicles while destroying 200 German vehicles. This ratio, 6-1 in American favor, seems impossible given German technical advantages. It becomes comprehensible only when understanding the role of communication in modern warfare. The Battle of Arracourt taught lessons that military theorists would study for decades. Technical superiority in individual weapons systems matters less than systemic superiority in coordinating those systems. Better tanks lost to better coordination. Stronger armor proved irrelevant against better information. Longer range guns couldn't compensate for faster communications. The Germans possessed technical excellence. The Americans possessed systemic integration. In September 1944, systemic integration won decisively. Post-battle analysis by both sides confirmed these conclusions. American after-action reports emphasized the critical importance of radio communication in achieving victory. German reports focused on American coordination capability as the decisive factor in their defeat. One German panzer commander wrote, "The Americans fought with their radios, not their tanks. We never knew where they were until they fired. They always seemed to know where we were." This observation captured the essential truth. The Americans won the information warfare before the first shot fired. Everything else followed from that fundamental advantage. The technology diffusion after Arracourt proved the validity of these lessons. American tank battalions standardized on the SCR 508 and its successors. Every Sherman carried advanced radio equipment. Command tanks received additional radios for coordination with higher headquarters. The principle became doctrine. Coordination capability matters more than individual vehicle capability. German forces attempted to improve their radio networks in the war's final months. They introduced upgraded Fugue systems with better range and additional channels. These improvements came too late. German industry, crippled by Allied bombing and resource shortages, couldn't produce adequate numbers of improved radios. German tank units fought the war's final battles with the same communication limitations that doomed them at Arracourt. The broader implications extended beyond World War II. Post-war tank development emphasized communications systems alongside guns and armor. The American M48 Patton tank, named for the 3rd Army commander who won at Arracourt, carried multiple radio systems as standard equipment. Soviet tank development, influenced by examining captured German vehicles and studying American tactics, prioritized communications capability in new designs. Modern main battle tanks dedicate more internal volume to communications equipment than crews from 1944 would recognize. The lesson learned at Arracourt that information dominates in modern warfare became foundational principle for all subsequent military development. Creighton Abrams went on to legendary military career. He commanded Combat Command B during the Battle of the Bulge. He led the relief column that broke through to Bastogne. He eventually rose to command all American forces in Vietnam. The Monet Abrams tank, America's current main battle tank, bears his name. That naming honored his World War II achievements. His understanding that armored warfare required coordination more than firepower. His exploitation of communications technology to defeat technically superior German armor. His demonstration that 8 radios, properly used, could destroy 40 tanks that shouldn't have been vulnerable. The Sherman tank itself developed reputation as inferior to German armor. That reputation persists in popular memory. The Panther had better armor, better gun, better automotive performance on paper. But the Sherman had something more valuable. It had a radio network that transformed individual tanks into coordinated fighting systems. It had doctrine that emphasized combined arms coordination over individual vehicle capability. It had crews trained to fight as battalion-level units rather than isolated vehicles. The Sherman succeeded not despite its technical limitations, but because American doctrine never intended Sherman tanks to fight German tanks in individual duels. American doctrine intended Sherman battalions to coordinate concentrated fire that German tanks couldn't survive, regardless of their technical specifications. The mathematics that said 1 Panther equals 5 Shermans assumed individual tank combat. It assumed isolated engagements where technical specifications determined outcomes. At Arracourt, American tanks never fought those battles. They fought coordinated battalion-level operations, where 5 Shermans concentrated fire against 1 Panther from multiple directions simultaneously. Where American tanks knew German positions before visual contact, where every American vehicle received identical tactical picture through radio networks that updated in real time. Under those conditions, the mathematical ratio reversed. 1 Sherman battalion defeated 2 German panzer brigades because coordination dominated technical specifications. The lesson transcends tank combat. It applies to all modern military operations. Individual weapons system capability matters less than the ability to coordinate multiple systems toward common objectives. Information flow matters more than armor thickness. Communication speed matters more than gun range. The side that can gather, process, and distribute battlefield information faster wins regardless of technical specifications on individual weapons. In September 1944, near the French town of Arracourt, American forces proved these principles decisively. German tank commanders who survived Arracourt carried those lessons back to their units. They reported that American forces seemed to possess impossible awareness of German movements. They described American tanks appearing from unexpected directions at precise moments to achieve maximum effect. They couldn't understand how technically inferior American forces achieved such complete tactical dominance. The answer sat in the turret bustle of every Sherman: 181 pounds of radio equipment, vacuum tubes and crystal oscillators and FM transmitters. Technology that connected isolated tanks into networked fighting systems. The Battle of Arracourt lasted 11 days. American forces lost 32 armored vehicles, German forces lost 200. The technical specifications said this should have been impossible. The Americans should have lost hundreds of Shermans, destroying 200 Panthers. Instead, they demonstrated that modern warfare rewards coordination over technical excellence. That information dominates firepower. That 8 radios, working together through coordinated doctrine and integrated communication networks, could destroy 40 tanks that were individually superior in every measurable specification except the one that mattered most: the ability to fight as coordinated units rather than isolated vehicles. The title suggests hyperbole. 8 radios destroying 40 Tigers in 90 minutes. The reality at Arracourt proved even more remarkable. Over 11 days of continuous combat, American radio networks enabled tactical coordination that destroyed 200 German tanks while losing 32 American vehicles, not through superior armor or guns, not through better training or more experienced crews, through systematic exploitation of communications, technology that transformed the nature of armored warfare. The Germans brought better tanks, the Americans brought better systems. At Arracourt, and in every subsequent engagement for the rest of the war, better systems won. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.